So glad you could be with us. Thanks for tuning in. Doc Mason here, your host. We're trying to start a new political party, a party that will allow us to vote our religious affiliations, our religious conscience, our faith, so that we will never again say that I voted for the lesser of two evils. I voted for a lesser. No, we want to start a new political party, one that supports obviously the Constitution of the United States, and one that supports our religious affiliations and beliefs. It's about time. You know, in this country, we've lost the moral high ground that we once had as a founding nation. We've lost the moral high ground. Of course, at that time, there were some lows. Slavery, bad time for America. Terrible time for America, especially when it was time to claim the moral high ground. We already went over the Declaration of Independence, some of the founding documents, and we spoke about the moral high ground that's needed. Much of what we see today is that we've lost the moral high ground. We've lost it. It's gone. There's so much corruption. There's so much disunity. There's so much of much that it's hard to explain, but how we treat immigrants, how we treat the poor, the marginalized, the dysfunctional, we leave them, those who are dysfunctional by way of behavior, may have some mental issues. We leave them on the streets. We've shut down the institutions that used to care for them, and we no longer care for them. We lock them up, and we put them in places they should not be. We've just lost the moral high ground, racism and the injustice. And that's what we want to talk about today, justice reform, how it would look with a new political party, a new party added to the democracy. But more importantly, and most important, God has something he wants to say to us. And that's why we're going through much of what we're going through. And that is, God has something that he wants to say to all of us, and not just to America, but to the world, because the world is watching. When we talk about justice reform, when we talk about the behavior of law enforcement in African American communities, they're looking for justice, they're looking for reform, and that's what we want to talk about. What does God have to say about law enforcement? What does God have to say about policing? What does God have to say about how we treat each other during that? And what kind of reform that really needs to take place? I'm not going to just generalize and say we need to get rid of a police department. We need to defund police. No, we're going to get specifically into the issues. And I have 6 issues that we need to discuss, begin discussing, and begin to resolve. I have some solutions, but it's talking points. And that is, I want everyone who wants to have a stake in this to begin talking about it, put pressure on our leaders to do something. Let's begin to talk about these issues. I believe that it falls within the parameters of what God has set up so that we don't fall victim to fighting against God. God has instituted, God has ordained, God has set up the system of policing, not as we know it today. But let me just say and start by saying that policing is necessary. It's necessary. You really can't explain what police officers go through. And I'm not at all justifying any type of misconduct whatsoever. Let's get real. What I'm saying is that police officers experience the most vile and despicable, the most inhumane, the most dastardly wicked acts on the face of the earth. And not just one time, but almost every day, they come up against the most dastardly wicked evil one can imagine. And they have to make sense of it. And in that vein, it's very difficult, and we should be sensitive. So let's begin with, what does God have to say about policing? And then let's work within those parameters to reform what we know policing is today. We can see then how far policing has come and how much it has digressed from how it was designed to be. Let's take a look. Romans chapter 13. In Romans chapter 13, verses 1 through 7. I want to read that. Romans chapter 13, verses 1 through 7. Romans 13, 1 through 7. It says in chapter 13, Romans chapter 13 and verses 1 through 7. It says, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers." Every soul, every human body, every soul be subject to the higher powers. For there is no power but of God. No power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. All right. Let's stop there for a second. Let's pause. Selah. Let every soul be subject unto God, basically, because there is no power or authority out here except that of God. And if there be any power or authority out here, it's because God has ordained it. God has directed it. God is behind it. The power, not what the power does, but the power, the authority. God has ordained it to be so. Let's get that clear. So law enforcement is a necessary here on earth. For there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Verse 2. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God. So you fight against the power, you fight against the ordinance, the direction of God, the mandate of God. And they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. Now that does not support police brutality. Let me repeat that again. Does not support police brutality. Verse 3, we'll get on. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. There you go. The rulers that are in place should not make good people afraid. They are here for those who do evil and wickedness. Verse 3, for rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. Now, obviously, we've fallen far from that standard, but let's move on. For he, talking about the ruler who has this power that has been ordained or directed or mandated by God, he or she, for he is the minister of God to thee for good. Let's stop. We're so far off the mark. A police officer, minister of God, for good. Some of them, not all of them. Half? I don't know. Do you know? I know, what is it, about 1,000 people shot, killed in 1 year? Let's start keeping track. I believe it's about 1,000. For he or she is a minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid. For he beareth not the sword in vain. He beareth not his gun in vain. For he is a minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Now that's clear. That's clear. Police officers, the whole idea of this power and their authority is vested in biblical proclamation. That is, the Bible says that sort of institution is needed, that God uses the people in that institution not to terrorize good people and those who do good, but to render what evil people need to get. He or she beareth not the sword in vain. There it is. He or she is a minister or ministress of God. Verse 5, wherefore ye must needs be subject, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake. Be subject to them. For this cause pay ye tribute also. For they are God's ministers, attending continually upon this very thing. Render therefore to all their dues, tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. In other words, God's saying, that's why you pay taxes. That's why we pay taxes. We pay taxes to support this system, this institution, these individuals. The way it's supposed to work is that these individuals are here not for those who do good, but for those who are about doing evil. They're here as God's ministers. A minister means helper, help. They're here as God's ministers to bring those who are doing evil to judgment. So the encouragement is to do good works and not evil, and will avoid all of this wrath, or will avoid the mere reason that these individuals have swords or guns and billy clubs. They used to carry a belt that they could pull off, or some kind of strap. When I was a young person, around less than 10 years old, I remember police officers, if they caught a person who stole a pocketbook, they would catch them, stop them, pull their pants down, and take off a strap and whoop their behind. Yeah. Right there in the street. Didn't care who was driving by. Didn't care if neighbors were watching. Whoop your behind. Catch you with that pocketbook running? Oh, no. We always, as a community, we didn't like it. I didn't hear anything good about it. I can't recall anything good about the fact that police officers would whoop your behind in public, give you a beat down, or a beating, as we would call it then, except for the fact that it's a shame that this person was in the act doing what they were doing. That's a shame. But as far as the police were concerned, they were doing their job, what they were allowed to do. Some frowned on it, some applauded it as a proper deterrent. It was in the air. But I want to make it clear, getting rid of a police department may not be in your best interest. Defunding, okay, be careful. Getting rid of, I can't see that. Not based on Romans 13. They are ministers. These are helpers of God. That means they're supposed to be working for your benefit, those who would do good. They're supposed to be working for us. And we've come to find that it is. It's reversed. The police come roaring through our community, and I have witnessed this personally, because neighbors have been taught not to participate in police investigations when they see things going on in their own communities. They have been taught not to say anything, because once the word gets out that you spoke, you put your house and children at risk. And we all know that. You can say all you want. It's a duty of citizens to speak out. You can say all you want. It's a duty. We need your help. The police cannot police without, look, you can come all you want with that. But you have taught us not to participate in your investigations unless we are willing to put our lives and family and property at risk, because we can't trust you to keep your mouth shut as to who told you what you know. You know as well as I know that you will be compensated by your neighbors when they find out that you're the one complaining. Even if you just complain about the noise in your neighborhood, they're going to come knocking on your door, asking you what you complaining about. Who told them that I called? Let alone a drug house or something like that. Somebody go into somebody's house and steal something, rob them at gunpoint, and ministers of God? Are you kidding me? We don't think of them as ministers of God. Matter of fact, they have lost our trust. And that's the bottom line here. What we're looking for is, how do we get the trust back? How do we get the community to put their trust in this institution as they help us remain safe and as they help God carry out what he wants to carry out to evil people? That's the key. And I have 6 solutions as we talk about these problems that we have with policing. We need to talk about it, air it out. And I believe if we create these reforms, we will get there. Matter of fact, we will be there. We will be there. The issues are in perhaps early retirement for police officers. Definitely a psych evaluation before they enter the force, and several times while they are on duty as they go through that 40 years. Maybe that 40 years need to be reduced to 20 years. I don't know if you see evil over and over, murders and just cruelty over and over and over again, there's sometimes it has to do something to you. I don't care how good you are, a good person, even a righteous person, in many ways is a good person, doing what's right. If you experience the kind of evil that these officers are subjected to, it has to bother you in some way. You may even consider, if you're in the ghetto, that is any group of people that are like race. It could be a white ghetto, could be a Chinese ghetto, could be a African American ghetto, could be a Latino or Hispanic ghetto. If the majority of those people are like-minded, are of the same ethnicity, then that will be called a ghetto. And if you're in this ghetto and you see all this evil, I don't know how long before something may click or has the propensity to snap, click, your mind just go to, is everyone like this? You see so much of it, you know, how many times do you have to see? It's like war. You can't describe, you can't come home from Afghanistan or some other place or Vietnam or someone and try to describe what you have experienced so that people will really understand the adrenaline that you experience, the misfortune of seeing soldiers die in rapid succession, blood, brains blown out, people being blown away with bombs and grenades. I mean, how do you explain that? And at some point, doesn't something click mentally that stays with you for a long time, if not forever? And at some point, I believe one of the solutions we need to talk about is to lessen or have some type of rotation out of the police force at a certain amount of years. And during that time, have psych evaluations to make sure that they're okay. Let's look at mental agility before they enter the force. And let's look at mental agility 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, on and on. I mean, we can schedule these evaluations, mandatory evaluations, to see if any type of racism to that particular ghetto, that particular group of people has come into play because of all the experiences, to help them to settle and understand what they're seeing, to call evil evil, and that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. See, maybe we need some more Christians or more religious folk involved in the policing process. One who understands, and even they would need to go through this process, but one, maybe they could digest evil a little better, because they know that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual wickedness in high places, rulers of darkness, and principalities, powers. Let's talk. The first would be some type of psychological evaluation on an annual or biannual or some kind of regular schedule. The second has to do with police lying. We got plea bargaining to talk about. We have just 50 years ago, the Supreme Court, I don't know if they knowingly or what they were up to, but they argued a case and resolved the case that today a police officer can lie and mislead, or they call it misrepresent the truth. They can be deceptive. That's the word I was looking for. And it's okay to come into an interrogation room and be deceptive in order to get a conviction. Frazier versus Krupp, I believe it was 1969. We can talk more about it after our first break, but 1969, Frazier versus Cupp, I believe it was, C-U-P-P, or Krupp, no, Cupp, C-U-P-P, I believe. Frazier versus 1969. The case law that follows says that a police officer can come into an investigation while you're in the middle of not an investigation, an interrogation. While you're in the middle of being interrogated, they may have offered a plea bargain or something. They can come in and say that they have certain evidence and they don't. And that's constitutional. They can lie and literally come in and say, we have evidence, and they don't have the evidence, because they're under the impression that, you see, they can't force us to take a plea. They can't force us, but they cannot, the word is not force, but coerce. Let's play this out. You're sitting at an investigative, interrogative room. We've seen them on TV. I don't know if it's the same. You're sitting in there, and you can imagine all the pressure that's on you of what's going to happen. I've had family members that go in thinking that they had nothing to hide and that they would go in and tell the truth, and ended up serving time. And now what is said in our community is, do not go to the police voluntarily to talk with them about anything without an attorney. That's wise counsel. That's the wise counsel that's passed on, parent, son, I pass it on, okay? Do not go without, and I don't care how holy you think you feel, you want to be, how prayed up, how filled with the Holy Spirit you are, and that by fire. I don't care how burning is in your heart to tell the truth. It's like fire shut up in your bones. You just got to let it out. You can't hold it back. You got to tell the truth. You better go in there with an attorney. You can be sanctified, filled with the Holy Ghost, and that by fire, baptized in the Spirit, and, on and on. You better go in there with an attorney, or don't go at all. Because if you cannot afford an attorney, one will be offered to you, and that attorney, and any attorney that's worth their weight in gold or silver, costs money. And oftentimes, if you don't have that $200-$400 an hour charge, you can't pay that bill, then they'll take the case and wait. Some would refer to that as rule number 1 when they go to ask for a continuance. Rule number 1, judge. And everyone knows that means I have not gotten paid. If the prosecutor, the DA, or the assistant DA comes in and says, we have this evidence, or police officer comes in and says, we have this evidence, we have someone IDing you there, and boom. It's not whether or not you did it or not, it's whether the jury is going to believe their story or your story. And when you think about your story confronting their story, and in your mind, their story has evidence that they're claiming to have, but they don't have, you might take a plea for a lesser amount of years to serve. Plea bargains, another issue that needs to be resolved. We'll talk about it. Frazier versus Cupp, we're there now. That needs to be changed. Congress can do that today. Change the law. Change the law. Police cannot lie. See, this is the problem with community policing. When this law was passed, when the Supreme Court made this decision, Frazier versus Cupp, CUPP, I believe it was in 1969, that was the demise of community policing as we know it. Because once a police officer misrepresents himself or herself, uses deception to get your boy or your daughter locked up, community policing what? I don't care about no DARE program. I don't want to hear about no baseball, no basketball, police officers playing golf and teaching them. I don't want to hear nothing about that. You lied. You lied. And my son is now serving time because you lied. There is no more community policing with that household and the household that they communicate that lie to. There is no more community policing. It's over. And once you've gone through a neighborhood, you have zero cooperation. And I tell you, we've gone through neighborhoods where they know police officers not only will lie before the court case, they'll lie in the court proceedings. Change that law or change that decision. We don't have to wait for another decision to get to the Supreme Court. Make a law, Congress. Make Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi start talking now. Put people together right now to start talking about this and the impact it's having in communities, minority and otherwise, in communities of color and otherwise. Let's reclaim the moral high ground. This is what we want to do. This is why I asked both parties to come together. When we talk about forming a new political party, a third party, we're looking at stopping the gridlock. We're looking at what God has to say to the nation and to the world, but also what we want to do. Real simple. We want to take the good out of both parties and combine it together to form another party. We want to take the social justice from the Democrats. We want to take the moral platform from the Republicans, add a little love to it. It's void of love. Sorry. We need to add a little love to it. And merge that together. We have the moral platform of the Republicans. We have the social justice platform of the Democrats. We merge it together. We form the middle. That's an exciting proposition. We form the middle. And if you can't agree with what we would stand for, stay where you are. Why not? Stay where you are and be satisfied. This is what democracy is all about. This is why democracy was created. This is why a republic, this is why this democracy, this is why this republic was created, for this type of rationale, forming parties, political parties, and thinking about how people can collaborate, who hold like opinions, etc. So, Frazier versus Cuff. Police officers lying and being deceptive in order to get a conviction. We need to end that practice right now. I guarantee you that most people don't even know that that exists, and there's case law concerning that, and that many of the law enforcement unions and other groups teach officers this. It's in the police magazines and so forth, that you can mislead, or you can use deception to get a conviction, as long as you're not coercive. I don't know how you can, I don't see a difference. It goes into the next issue we need to talk about, and that is we need to talk about plea bargains. Plea bargains. Yeah, plea bargains. Plea bargains. Do you know that some 80 to 90% of cases that, or let's say that, I don't even know how to explain it. Let's talk about some numbers. In 2003, there was 75,000 cases that were disposed of in federal district court. 75,000 by trial or by plea. So in 2003, you had over 75,000, over 500, 75,500 and something cases that were dismissed or disposed of for going to trial or plea bargaining. 75,500 and change cases were disposed of by going to trial or by plea bargaining. I know you're not going to be able to come close to estimating how many of the 75,000 that were disposed of by trial or plea were actually by plea bargains. Well, about 95% were disposed of by a guilty plea. In 2003, 75,573 cases were disposed of by trial or by plea. And of that 75,573 cases in 2003, 95% were disposed of by plea bargain. Where do I get that from? This is a study by the Bureau of Justice Assistance, U.S. Department of Justice. Lindsay Devers, I believe, she's a PhD. CSR Incorporated was commissioned, I believe paid for, to do this research. And this research was completed on January 24th, 2011. Okay. And these were the findings. Let me just read the introduction real quick. Plea bargain Plea bargaining is a defining, if not the defining feature of the federal criminal justice system. That's Brown and Bunnell, 2006, page 1063. In plea bargaining, a defendant is faced with a charge at arraignment. Typically, this is the maximum charge or punishment that the defendant will be held to if he or she goes to trial. The prosecutors will present the defendant with an opportunity to plead guilty to a lesser charge or to the original charge with less than the maximum sentence. In theory, the charge presented limits the penalties faced if the defendant decides to go to trial. While being found innocent or being acquitted is, of course, the best way for defendants to avoid jail time and other penalties, going to trial is perceived as risky. Remember that word, risky, because it is impossible to predict what a jury will decide. As a result, many defendants enter pleas. Many defendants enter pleas because it is impossible to predict what a jury will decide. Not that they're innocent, not that they're guilty. They're looking at what a jury might or might not say or understand or decide. Since when is convictions based on what a jury will decide, not a conviction, but even the right to trial? Whatever happened to, I'm innocent? Well, I'm here because I'm a bystander or because I'm his brother or I didn't do anything. Now I got to think about what a jury's going to, where's the evidence? Don't I have a right? Don't you have to prove that I did this? You mean to tell me you can come in here and be deceptive and lie about the evidence that you have? And then I got to take what you're saying and weigh that against what a jury may think and leave out the fact that I'm innocent. And then I got a court-appointed attorney who's convincing me that it's too risky, that what if you get convicted and then your sentence is going to be 5 times more than this plea bargain. You're young. Just plead your way out. Then have your everything expunged and continue with your life after 5 years, after 3 years, after 2 years. Just get it off the books. That's not justice. 95%. That's why our prisons are filling up with minority prisoners. This will make you want to curse. All the power is not with the judge and not with the jury. That's in your imagination. All of a sudden, the prosecutor becomes the judge because the prosecutor will be the one who says, you'll get the maximum here. You'll get 20 years to life. I'm offering you 3 years. It's in the prosecutor's discretion to make these bargains, these offers. That needs to stop. Plea bargain. Some say, why would someone take a plea if they didn't do it? Well, I'll just explain to you why. You got police officers coming in saying they got evidence that they don't have, and that and that's lawful, that's constitutional, because in their warped minds, way far from the biblical mandate that was set up for them, they're lying. And I didn't even get, after Romans 13, I read verses 1 through 7. But after that, the 10 Commandments are rewritten. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. This is in regards to both the institution that God has set up, both to the ministers and to those being administered to. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. That's a big one. How are you going to lie in a proceeding? You're working and acting under color of state law, officer. You are working in conjunction with the courts, officer. You're an arm of an extension of the court and the judge, officer. How are you going to come in and use deception, a lie, to try to get a conviction, officer? To save money? Because what? You don't have the manpower to investigate every crime that's committed? You're saving the court and the taxpayer money? Oh, wow, thank you. Because now we're spending it on the back end. We're room and board for prisoners. So that's not it. You're lying again. And to some, it's natural. They just lie, 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 lie. Some can't even stop lying. Every word come out of their mouth is a lie. Who's your daddy? We know who the father of all liars is. The Bible says the devil, Satan, is the father of all liars. God says the father of all liars is the devil. So you find one who lies, ask, who's your daddy? Do you know his name? That's another that needs to stop. We need to deal with the longevity in office. We need to deal with police officers being able to lie and be deceptive as being constitutional. Congress, you need to deal with that measure. Frazier versus Cupp. Police killing. Police officers who shoot and kill an unarmed civilian. Why don't we have a mandatory sentencing on that issue? I don't care who it is. If you just kill an unarmed any civilian, unarmed anybody, you need to do a mandatory sentence. And we're not talking about protective custody. I don't want to say general population because that would appear as though I'm being vindictive. But you need a mandatory sentence. We need a deterrent to this. Let me explain something. Really, let's go heart to heart. We have men and women who join the military right out of high school, and they're given assault rifles to use in combat. And as I said with policing, and as I said with the military, I'll say it again. No one except for another person who has been in combat can describe to you faithfully and accurately about combat and what it is and that entire experience. They're given weapons of mass destruction, not for hunting or shooting. We're talking about mass destruction. Assault rifles and the like. And if any one of them, we're talking about 18, 20 years old, 25 years old, if any one of them would go out and shoot and kill an unarmed civilian in any country in the world, they would face a certain court-martial. You just can't do that. You just cannot do it. Unarmed civilian, that you, with the weapons of mass destruction, if you were to kill one person or several, or develop a history of killing one person who is unarmed, a person who poses absolutely zero threat to you as a decorated and as a highly trained and well-equipped person of the military. You are armed and dangerous. But if you were to go out and kill unarmed people of any country whatsoever, you are held accountable. And I'm sure that you will have a discharge from service, from duty. Why then do we tolerate this nonsense from our own domestic law enforcement individuals? Why are we tolerating these actions coming from career officers who have been trained? I don't care how afraid you are. You can't do it in wartime, in times of war. You can't do it, especially in times of peace, if it's not tolerated in the military amongst the youngest profile. Why are we tolerating it with grown men who want to use an excuse for what they've done? There is no excuse. If men and women who are at the greatest danger can exercise a caution that if they exercise that caution, it may be the end of their lives. But if they all play by the same rules and they exercise that 1 second, 2 second, 3 second, whatever many second caution to make sure this person is unarmed before they shoot to kill or act on their fear or act on their suspicion or act on their perception or act on their gut feeling, whatever it is they were acting on their prejudice even. You better make sure that the person is unarmed before you use any kind of weapon or you're doing a mandatory minimum. That's the change we need. That's the change we seek. We are fed up with the excuses that are being made for killing unarmed people, individuals, and especially those who are in your custody. Now that you ought to get a double mandatory. Person is in your custody and it still ends up dead in your custody, which means you've searched him. There are no weapons. He is handcuffed and he's in your care and still ends up dead. Double mandatory. That's evil. That's the evil that the ministers of God, as we read, are helping him to eradicate out of the face of the earth. You're just as wicked of those you've been hired to deal with. And then you shouldn't become part of the wrath of God? Are you kidding me? I can't even make sense of an individual who would take a life. I mean, I hear what people are saying. Let's say this person is racist. And then to have the entire, that entire precinct, leadership as well, from the captain on down, Sarge, make up lies, make up falsehoods to prevent this officer from facing the responsibility of his actions or her. Corrupt. Okay, so police officers that shoot and kill, both shoot and or kill, an unarmed civilian, mandatory sentence. I would say life, but eye for eye, tooth for tooth, let's have mercy. Because plea bargains, one thing I didn't say about plea bargains. A plea bargain should not be offered before evidence can prove or not prove that a person has committed this or that crime. A plea bargain need be offered when you have 100% proof that a person has committed the crime. Let the plea bargain be offered at that time, because God is looking for those who love mercy. Watch it now. Mercy. Goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, sings the songwriter David in the book of Psalms. Goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever and ever. Amen. Where's the mercy? Plea bargains should not be given to coerce. I say coerce. You may say to entice. I don't know what the difference is. A confession. It need be offered as mercy. Once you have evidence that proves a person committed a crime, then offer a plea, a lesser. My opinion, that's how plea bargains should be administered. But let's talk. That's all I'm asking. It needs to be resolved. We need to do away with this system as it is today. That's for sure. No, don't even ask. Do we need to talk about it? Do we need to correct it? Yes, we do. But what is it? What's it going to be? Let me just say, I've said on other podcasts, I've said that a couple things. Number one is people should not have to speak truth to power. Power should speak truth to people. And no longer should a president stand before us. It's extremely offensive when corruption is all around and says to us May God bless you and may God bless America. That's offensive. When our acts are stench before the King of Kings, the Almighty, the All-Powerful, who knows all, who is everywhere present at the same time, who all power is in his hands. And you reek with corruption, deception. Now, don't get too holy on me, because all have sinned and fallen short of the glory. And I said what presidents and leaders should end their message on. If my people who are called by my name, watch it now, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face, turn from their wicked ways, then they will hear from heaven, and I will heal their land. Now, we need our land healed. At the minimum, we need it sanitized. But I will go with healing. But we quote that a lot as Christians, don't we? All we got to do is pray. All we got to do is pray. Prayer changes things. Yes, it does. Prayer does change things. I'm a living witness. I'm going to call on everyone to pray as soon as we're done. But isn't it ironic that God himself has singled out his people, the ones who are called by his name, the ones who say I'm religious, the ones who say I'm a Christian, the ones who not only say they're Christians, but want to act as though they are, whether they are or not. They want to, carry Bibles around and wear a chain. They have to show. Some people, that's just their personality. Others are arrogant and high-minded. But God says, if my people who are called by my name, he's talking about Christians, Catholics who believe in Christ. He says that if my people who are called by my name, if they will turn from their wicked ways, Christians, wicked ways? What? Did God just say that those who are called by his name, his people, he calls them his people? We said in the Old Testament there's covenants that you are our God and we are your people. We say that in prayer all the time. Oh, you are our God, Lord, and we are your people, and we're going to worship you, and we love you. And, if you're called by my name, and my people, I call you my people, you call me your God. If that group will turn from their wicked ways, that's disturbing. The ones who supposed to do right, the ones who know to do right, God says if they will turn from their wicked ways, you'll see some action. I'll do something for you that you cannot do yourself. But imagine that. Christians wicked. Well, let me tell you about not birds and the bees, maybe the flowers and the trees. I have to admit that I probably am the chief of sinners. And I believe in God, and He is my God, and I am within His people. And I worship Him as God and Creator. But I have to admit that I've missed the mark. Look, I'm talking now about America losing its moral high ground. And yet, I have to admit, I don't deserve to be bringing forth this message for God on His behalf. I haven't measured up to that standard, whatever it may be in your eyes, not even in my eyes. When it comes to sin, I'm the chief. The chief. And you, like me, you ain't perfect either. None of us are. And we won't be until He comes back for us. But this has to stop. When it comes to policing, once again, let's review. We need to psych evaluations, stop the deception that we find in Frazier versus Cupp in 1969, where the Supreme Court said that it's okay for an officer to use deception in interrogation to gain a conviction during that process. Police killing, mandatory sentence. Do not pass go. We don't even have to go to trial. When the coroner or other law-abiding personnel find no weapon on an individual, you go right. You can go right to Graterford or wherever you're going. You can save us all money. If the person is dead and had no weapon, it's over. We ain't got to take that to trial. Mandatory. Plea bargains. We need to reverse it. Too many of us, especially, can you imagine a plea guard, especially with this Frazier versus Cupp, where police can come in and use all kind of deceptive tactics to try to get you to plea. There's already enough pressure in there worrying about what a jury is going to, not whether you're innocent or guilty, but whether or not a jury is going to find or judge what are they thinking and how they're going to. Mind-boggling. That's why so many of us have been placed unjustly in this system that'll turn you around and spit you out. You're just another Negro. You mean? You get one, you get them all. All of them are criminals. You get one off the street, it's better for us all. What? I'm not going to respond. I'm not even going to respond. Policing is necessary. I will say that. Policing is necessary. However we do it, God has given us the ability to police ourselves, but we need His help. And He has ordained ministers to do His bidding. And not people that a church would call. These are people that a government would call. And whoever, this particular government is for the people and by the people. So we elect those who are in power to help us self-govern. Self-government, that's what this is. So when things go awry, we, the self in the government, need to step up and change things. And that's why we need to march and bring attention when people are not listening. But we do not need to riot and loot and burn and destroy and steal. We just can't. We just can't be in that kind of activity. Let me tell you why. And don't ever forget this, please. That's why we need to start afresh. That's why we need a new political party. One that allow you to vote your religious convictions. One that allow you to vote your faith. And for us all to reach the moral high ground. Because we should not be walking around saying that we voted for the lesser of two evils. That should not happen in this day and age. We ought to have enough parties in our repertoire that we would not have to say I voted for, it boiled down to these two choices, and I voted for the lesser of two evils. It should never come to that. Matter of fact, that's why I'm here, because in my spirit, God put in my spirit a burden that says, why are you burdened over this? Start a new party. I was grieving. I was burdened over the fact that I was voting for the lesser of two evils. I knew that certain things were not according to my faith, that I didn't believe in them. But I was voting in a party that practiced those things. And I would justify it and say, well, I would vote for the lesser of two evils. That is the Republican Party. You know, they have a moral platform where no abortions and no gay rights, no gay marriage. Those are fundamental. But they lack in so many other areas of morality. And they are very, very arrogant with their stuff. Oh my goodness. Very, very arrogant with all of their positions. Very arrogant. And so we need to add a little love to that. We need to add a little love. The Democrats, they favor abortions and gay rights and et cetera, gay marriage, stuff that's not supported in the biblical mandates, but nonetheless, they support those issues. And though they don't align with my faith, I voted Democratic. And my excuse was, the Democratic Party has done more good for African Americans in the last 50 years or so than no other party, no other government has done. So that's why I'm voting Democrat, is because of all the things since Jim Crow and civil rights and segregation, and through all those times, the Democratic Party has been there for minorities, African Americans. And so for you to say that you want to weaken government or lessen government, that's kind of offensive. Give power back to the states, which we know has done nothing. Nullification, interposition, Dr. King said. And yet we want to give power back to the states. Take it away from the federal government. That means that you are saying that the opposite of what we're saying. We're saying we're voting for the government to do. You're saying you're voting that the government not do for us the things that we need done, or work on our behalf, minorities' behalf, or behalf of everyone instead of just a few. And so here we have this moral issue going back and forth Republicans don't like the giveaways. They call it irresponsible giving. If a man does not work, he should not eat. Irresponsible giving away of money, taxpayer money to the poor or the less fortunate or the marginalized. Because of the decisions that they made, they want to ignore racism and all the things that created the situation in red districts and redlining of banks and investors in neighborhoods and their schools and so the outcome, they want to say that because of the labor intensive lack of investing in a neighborhood, that it boils down to the decisions that the individuals made instead of the conditions that we caused to create those decisions. Okay, so they don't like that. They don't like the fact that abortion, 50 million, abortions in this country since Roe v. Wade. And they don't like the fact that homosexuals have been given the right to marry, all these rights going to an activity that the Bible frowns on. Our faith frowns on the act of homosexuality, not the person, the act. And that act is connected to the person when it comes to eternal security. That is going to heaven. Got it. So what are we going? That's the lesser of two evils. Depending on which party you're in, that's the lesser of two evils. And I struggled with it. I promise you, I struggled with it. Whether or not to be Republican, then go against those who are really in need and how they treat those who are really in need. I couldn't. And then I look at the other moral issues that are on the table, abortions and so forth, and I struggle with it. And God says, why? Why are you struggling? Create something that you don't have to struggle with those issues. And a lot more. It's not just those. Those are the ones that we're looking at. But social justice, criminal justice, justice reform rather, and so many other issues, housing and immigration and all these other things that are foreign. There's foreign policy issues and all of this that's going on. There's an answer for it. And I believe we have the answer. I'm excited. If we start this, we can do something. You want to do something fantastic, miraculous. Let's get something done. Let's plant this party that allow us to vote our faith, our religious conscience. So we will never ever say, I voted for the lesser of two evils. Let's do something now. Let's put it on the table now and affect this coming election. So God wants to say something to this nation and to the world. For example, China accused America of being hypocritical because America wanted to turn the military, put the military in the streets to keep the calm, to keep people from looting and marching and violence. And America just accused China of the exact same issue that a lot of folks were rioting and throwing stuff at the Chinese police. And they wanted to use the military and so forth to calm the groups down, and America accused them of civil rights violations. All of that, right? Back and forth. So they're saying, "Oh, you're a hypocrite when you're going to put the military out there to squash all of your violent behavior and marches, but we can't do the same thing." And just let me say, It was bad advice. Now the Chinese are calling us hypocrites. Where's the moral? High ground in that? When we have other nations calling us hypocrites, they're watching us. They're marching for Black Lives Matter, meaning that there's something that's happening to African Americans that's not happening anywhere else. That's what Black Lives Matter means. And so there are places all over Australia, all over Africa, Europe, all over. People who are agreeing and aligning themselves under this movement for their own lives and their own security. And they are aligning themselves because they see themselves in what we are marching about and for. God, see, the world is watching America, and God has something he wants to say to America and to the world. This is a defining moment, and the vehicle is a new party. And the messenger, Doc Mason. So far, Doc Mason, who in his own words is not qualified and does not deserve this assignment. But we have to move on. That is, move on in the assignment. Plea bargainings need to be reversed. Police killing, mandatory sentences. Police lying or using deception. Frazier versus Cupp, C-U-P-P, 1969. We need a moratorium on deception anywhere in the process of justice. It needs to be abolished. Now, there's another area that I didn't mention that needs also to be addressed. And that's the grand jury process. The district attorney, the DA, the prosecutor forms a jury pool, and they go in to discuss an indictment on a police officer. And during this trial or procedure, several things are at play. Number one, it is a conflict of interest, because the DA, the prosecutor, is a part of the legal process of convicting defendants. And the DA needs the police in order to bring valid convictions, because the police are the ones who gather the evidence. So if the police threaten the DA that they will not help put away criminals and will not help in researching and doing the necessary things that are done to bring a conviction, then the DA would have to do it on their own. And that's a huge, totally impossible job for the DA, unless they hire as many police officers, et cetera, et cetera. They don't have the investigators to go out and investigate what the police can investigate, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a conflict of interest. You got people working for each other. Now you got them working against each other. Not going to work. It's a conflict of interest. That's one thing. So the process should not be represented by the DA, but it is right now, and that's a conflict of interest. The second thing is that the prosecutor can share whatever evidence they deem is necessary and not share whatever evidence they deem is not necessary. That means they can shape the opinion of that jury pool. And that should not be. because that jury pool will never, ever indict a police officer if they don't have the necessary evidence. And if the prosecutor withholds the evidence, and all this is done in secrecy, and we'll never know, which is another issue. If all this is done in secrecy behind closed doors, that's another problem. And it needs to end. We can't just say we're going to decrease funding, we're going to dismantle, we're going to do all this, we're going to, stop the chokeholds. That's all the surface stuff. No one has taken the time to dig down at the root of this monstrous tree and say that the roots need to be reformed. They need to be placed in a different soil that will nurture it. This tree needs to be uprooted and replanted in different soil. Because if you leave the tree, plant it where it is, and just clip some of its branches, that tree is going to remain and come back and bear even more fruit than it did before. That means it's just going to get worse. If you cut back and shear a tree, all it's going to do is grow and bear more fruit. But if you replant it in different soil, you'll get a different outcome. That fruit will not be the same. It will not taste the same. Either you feed it with man's wisdom or with God's wisdom. That's what it boils down to. Either you can do it on your own or you can go with God in all of these issues. Bearing false witness against your neighbor, that's deception. I don't know how you think you can be effective for God and country if you are bearing false witness against your neighbor. You're using deception. And then you're going to turn around and you're going to say, oh, why would someone admit to something they didn't do? Come on, man. Come on. Stop playing the game. That's deception. Why would they do it? Look at I don't even want to explain it. It's so corrupt. They're facing 20 to life. That's something that the prosecutor came up with, totally in their purview to design exactly how many years the maximum could be. They designed what the minimum is going to be in the plea bargain. They're sitting there studying you, and they're coming up with what is it going to take to get him to sign a plea. That's what they're looking at. And if they have to lie to do it, and then you're going to turn around and ask, why would you admit to something you didn't do? You can't explain the fear and intimidation and trepidation that you feel in that situation unless you have gone through that situation. And I've experienced it to some degree. I'm afraid just officer walking up to my car. Turn the lights on, I put my hands on the steering wheel. I let the officer know, look, I'm going into the glove compartment. I got to reach into my back pocket. Is that okay? Oh, yeah. Okay, I go do it. But not until they say it's okay. I'm not afraid because of the way they approach my car and talk to me. I'm afraid because of the institution. I don't know which one of these officers is a good one or a bad one. There's no badge or voice to tell me which one I can trust and which ones I cannot trust. And so that jury situation, that grand jury situation needs to be resolved and dealt with. Here's a solution to it. If the prosecutor can call a grand jury and seek an indictment, then the defense should be able to call a grand jury to seek prosecution. then we level the playing field. Let the defense call and give his or her evidence. And if the jury of the defense says indict, we indict. Whether the prosecutor's grand jury says indict or not indict. But if either one says indict, we indict. And the only way that if both agree on indict or not indict, they both agree, it shall be. Whatever they agree, it shall be. But if one says indict and the other says do not indict, we go to trial. And that levels the playing field. You're not going to hide behind indecency. You're not going to hide behind deception. That's darkness. And men and women love darkness because their deeds were evil, the Bible says. You think about it. They love behind closed doors. They love sealing things off because their deeds were evil. They don't want transparency. Are you kidding? Because their deeds are evil. And that's what these ministers of God, these who have been ordained of God, this institution, to deal with the evil in the land. That's it. But men love darkness behind closed doors because their deeds were not right, but wicked, evil. So that's the game. That's what we need to focus on. That's why. This is the reason why we're looking to form a new political party. Man, if we can get this going, a party that you can go, I'm not voting for the lesser of two evils ever again. If you can walk up and say that, wow. Really a party that we can vote our religious affiliations, our religious conscience, our faith. We can go in there and come out and not feel compromised at all. We've lost the moral high ground and we have to reclaim it. And if we reclaim the moral high ground, then God will continue to bless this country. But if we don't, we are going under. I promise you that. God has blessed us. And let me just, I want to be as power should speak truth to people. People should not have to speak truth to power. But the last administration, as great as it was, and as great as it is, and as great as it's going to be, led us to a dark moral period. And I long to speak with the former president about that darkness. For many, and especially older voters, we all felt it. We all saw the darkness, and many have been discouraged and have walked away from democracy. There are many Republicans who see the racism and the disdain for those who are less fortunate, the arrogance. And we got 2 hours to talk about that as well. We got 2 hours to talk about immigration. We got 2 hours to talk. Look, we're going to be talking. I want to let you know what this new party will stand for. I want you to know. Now we're not going to gloss over it and do a 2-3 minute segment on it to say that, oh, look, lesser two evil. Oh, look, something new, blah, blah, blah. No. We're going to spend some time talking. I want to lay the biblical foundation for this new party. You need to know that it is backed in the Word of God. You need to know that. And that's all I've been speaking to you about, is that the institution is necessary. but it's how we use this institution, it's how we use this power that will either make us effective or ineffective. And it's up to us. We have to make these changes. Now, I'll say this. My time is at 9. We have to make these changes, and we can only make them together. It is critical that when we march, we march respectfully. We do not destroy. We do not steal. We do not loot. We do not burn buildings. The media will focus on it to our demise. Let me just share some numbers with you to help you understand what's at stake when we do those things. Not only will we be responsible to God because what goes around comes around, some say, but you reap what you sow in life. That's a universal principle that cannot be broken. You will reap what you sow, what you have sown. That's one. Number two is it offsets the validity of what we're marching for. And that's important because we need others to get involved. Understand this, that we need others like white folks to get them. We're only 12% of the population. We meaning African Americans. We're only 12% of the population. So it's very little that we can do on our own. Now, look, I'm not high-minded. 12% is 12%, and it ain't much. That doesn't mean that because we are few that we can accomplish a few. No. God has raised up millions who are not African or African American, of African American descent, to help. You think about, and this is a compliment to all nationalities, especially those who are white. God has used white folks in every major accomplishment for African Americans since we've been in this country. We've done a lot of individual stuff, don't get me wrong. We've done a lot of things collectively, don't get me wrong. But every major event that we have gone to the next level, God has raised up white folks to join us. From Emancipation Proclamation to the Civil War, and on and on. They marched with us. They died with us. They put their families and homes at risk because of us. We cannot afford to disenfranchise that group of folk from helping us, because history says that they were there as well. Now, let me just share, let's look at President Obama's last, when he beat Mitt Romney. There was under 40 million that voted for President Obama. 40 million white Democrats. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. 40 million white Democrats voted for President Obama. 57 million white Republicans voted for Mitt Romney. That's a 17 million difference. That's where we came in, where over Was it? That's where we came in. We're 17 million, 12% of the population came of African Americans, and evened the score. They evened the score. So now it's 57-57. Tie score. Now, the Supreme Court will want you to believe that racism doesn't exist and that we've done so well. Over 90% of us voted that were registered to vote. Over 90% of all registered African American voters voted for Obama, whether they were Democrat or Republican. They voted for Obama. And that hit a lot of people in the gut. That's the first time that has ever happened that over 90% of those who registered voted for one particular candidate. That's never happened before. So the Supreme Court would think that they could gut the Voting Rights Act because we didn't need it anymore because of that fact. But what they didn't understand or didn't take into consideration, they overreached, is that the Congress had just updated the Voting Act the year before. So there was no need for them to get involved because whatever Congress votes on is constitutional. But here and there. So we need to, in closing, we're looking at not disenfranchising others to come, because now that the score is even, and the difference is that 5 million white Republicans dropped out of the race and did not vote because they didn't like Mitt Romney's flip-flopping and couldn't trust him. And the other, what bumped Obama up, President Obama up, was the other Asian and Hispanic Latino votes. That's what brought him way over, and he actually won. But just think about it, if that 5 million, 5 million, and that's why the Republicans refused to repent, because they found out that it's that 5 million that cost them. So that instead of changing, they decided to keep it on and go out and try to find that 5 million. But anyway, we need to talk about these things. We need to keep them on our minds. We need Congress to get involved where they need to get involved. We need the community to talk about this, to keep pressure on Congress and others. We need to begin the dialogue, and we need to get this party up and running. I'm gonna need your help. I'm gonna need lawyers. I'm gonna need volunteers. I need folk to help administratively. I need foot soldiers to go, and we need foot soldiers to go and to help us get this party established. Thank you and good night.